If you're doing meaningful work, you've probably felt the urge to share your ideas more widely, to write, speak, or teach in a way that shapes how others think and act. That's the heart of becoming a thought leader, someone whose insights are trusted, sought out, and used as a guide by others. And here's the good news: you don't need a massive platform, a huge following, or a famous name to start. You need clarity, consistency, and a commitment to being genuinely useful. Let's start with why this matters. Edelman and LinkedIn's 2024 B2B Thought Leadership Impact Report found that about 73% of decision makers say thought leadership is a more trustworthy way to assess a company's capabilities than traditional marketing materials. In other words, people trust insight more than slogans. And in the 2025 report, Edelman and LinkedIn highlight something even more interesting: so called hidden buyers, the behind the scenes influencers inside organizations, are strongly impacted by thought leadership. In fact, Edelman's 2025 reporting notes that compelling thought leadership can make these hidden buyers far more open to outreach and more likely to advocate internally. Now, I know you might be thinking, that's business. I'm just one person. But the principle transfers. In careers and leadership, opportunities don't just go to the most competent person. They often go to the person whose competence is visible and understood by others. This is where a lot of capable people get stuck, especially women and underrepresented professionals. There's a real visibility paradox. You're told to speak up and be confident, but if you self promote too boldly, you may face social penalties. Research on hiring and self promotion has found that high self promotion can trigger backlash depending on the candidate's gender and age, even when competence is recognized. So, if you've ever felt like you're walking a tightrope, trying to be taken seriously without being labeled too much, you're not imagining it. Becoming a thought leader, done ethically, is one of the best ways to resolve this paradox. Because it's not look at me, it's here's what I've learned, here's what the evidence suggests, and here's how you can use it. So, how do you actually do it? Step one is to clarify your niche and your point of view. Thought leadership isn't about leading every conversation, it's about leading one specific conversation consistently. Start by choosing a narrow, meaningful problem you care about. Ask yourself, what do I understand deeply because of training, lived experience, or repeated exposure? Who is affected by this problem? And where do I see confusion, outdated advice, or missing guidance? For example, leadership is too broad, but reducing burnout in early career physicians, or building psychologically safe teams in healthcare, or how to communicate with calm authority under pressure, those are clear. Then define your because. Try completing this sentence. In my field, people often believe X, but my experience and the research suggest Y, because that because is your signature. It's your lens. It's what makes your content different from generic tips. Next, turn your niche into a simple positioning statement. Here's a formula: I help this specific audience solve this specific problem by using this specific approach. For example, I help mid level healthcare leaders reduce team burnout by turning research on psychological safety into weekly, practical leadership habits. When you can say it in one sentence, you can build around it. Step two is to build credibility without feeling fake. Many people avoid visibility because they think it means bragging, but the most sustainable kind of credibility is actually service based. Instead of, I'm amazing, your message becomes, here's what worked, here's what didn't, and here's the framework so you can apply it. Use what I call impact framing and learning framing. Impact framing sounds like, we reduced turnover by 15% after implementing weekly feedback huddles. Here's the exact agenda we used. Learning framing sounds like, we tried 3 approaches to improve follow up. 2 failed. Here's what didn't work and why the third approach did. You're still sharing results. You're still signaling competence, but you're doing it in a way that centers value and learning, which tends to build trust faster and reduce backlash. Step 3 is to create evidence based content that people can actually use. This is where you become unforgettable. A powerful model for thought leadership is research plus real life plus action. So you cite a principle from the evidence, You connect it to a real scenario, and then you give people a next step. Here's one example. Amy Edmondson's foundational research on psychological safety, published in Administrative Science Quarterly, showed that teams learn and perform better when people feel safe to take interpersonal risks like asking questions, admitting mistakes, or challenging ideas. So, how do you translate that into content people can use Monday morning? You might teach 3 meeting habits that increase psychological safety. Habit 1: rotate who speaks first so the same voices don't dominate. Habit 2: leaders model fallibility by saying, "Here's something I'm still figuring out." Habit 3: end meetings with one question: what did we miss? And respond with appreciation, not defensiveness. That's thought leadership. It's not theory alone, it's theory turned into practice. Now let's talk strategy, because you do not need to publish everywhere. A sustainable approach is one pillar piece per week, and then repurpose it. A pillar piece could be a blog post, a podcast episode, a LinkedIn article, or a long form video. Then you create 3 to 5 smaller pieces from it: a short insight post, a story, a checklist, a quote graphic, a short clip. This approach is consistent with what we see in professional content research. Decision makers spend real time with high quality insights, and repetition builds familiarity and trust. Step 4 is amplification, getting your ideas seen. LinkedIn is often the best platform for professional thought leadership because it reaches both visible decision makers and hidden influencers. Practical steps: optimize your headline to reflect your niche, not just your job title. Post 2 to 3 times per week. Mix insights, real examples, and practical tools. Then layer in speaking. Offer a lunch and learn at work. Pitch a small podcast. Host a webinar. Speaking matters because people don't just learn your ideas, they experience your presence, your clarity, and your credibility. And don't do this alone. Collaborate strategically. Co-create a webinar with someone adjacent to your niche. Invite a researcher for a short Q&A. Do a mini series where you interview 3 people who implemented the same practice in different settings. Collaboration builds trust faster because you're embedded in a wider conversation. Step 5 is community. The strongest thought leaders don't just broadcast, they build spaces where ideas can be discussed and tested. You can do this by inviting disagreement, normalizing experimentation, and asking better questions. Create small spaces for deeper interaction: monthly roundtables, office hours, short challenges. Now I want to close with a simple 90-day plan. Days 1 through 30, clarity and foundation. Write your positioning statement. Choose 3 themes. Update your bio. Identify 10 to 15 key studies or reports in your niche and summarize them in your own words. Draft your first pillar piece. Days 31 through 60, consistency. Publish 1 pillar piece per week. Repurpose each into 3 to 5 micro pieces. Engage intentionally by commenting thoughtfully and sharing others' insights with your perspective. Host 1 live session. Days 61 through 90, amplification and refinement. Collaborate with 3 to 5 people. Launch a small recurring gathering. Ask your audience what they want more of. Review what resonated, what felt aligned, and what questions keep repeating. Then build your next content cycle around that. And if you're hesitating because you don't feel ready, here's the reframe. You don't have to be the world's top expert. You just need to be clear, evidence-informed, and a few steps ahead of the people you're serving. You can be a guide, not a guru. And each time you publish, teach, or share a tool, you're not just building a brand. You're building a body of work. And over time, that body of work becomes your reputation. That's how a thought leader is made, one useful idea at a time. Grab my free leadership workbook, 5 Steps to Communicate with Calm, Clarity, and Confidence at powerofpeacefulness.com. Until next time, take a deep breath, embrace the present moment, and keep walking your path to peace.